Welcome to the CTQ Smartcast. Today we have with us Sridhar Shukla. He's a co-founder and managing director of kPoint, a business-focused video sharing platform with easy creation, engagement, and analysis. Sridhar, welcome to the Smartcast.
Thank you, Ramanand. Great to be talking to you.
So Sridhar, let's rewind the clock a little bit. I've always been, I knew a little bit about you. I was doing some research and this intrigued me. Before you got into entrepreneurship and the big bad world of business, you were an academic for a few years. So tell me a little bit about how you left that world behind for entrepreneurship and business.
Sure, Ramanand, believe it or not, that first job of being a tenure track faculty member at a university was not as academic as one would think a university job is. The simple matter was, they said, look, we have a certain teaching load. You can carry teaching load for all 12 months, or you can do the minimum. But for the remaining period, you find ways to pay yourself. The minimum load you had to carry was teach 6 months, so 2 quarters of the year, and do research or whatever you want, provided somebody is picking up your salary tab and paying the university some tax on top so that they are able to provide you with all the support. So the academic job was not our classical understanding of academics. It was pretty much something which had some entrepreneurial element to it because you had to go figure out how to get funds for your own time. And a lot of universities follow that model, in the US at least. And so that helped me right from the word get-go. The shift was very easy.
Okay. Did you have to make a certain number of mindset switches in going the entrepreneurial way, or did you have, for example, were you the kind who in college would go and organize events, and so did that bug bite early?
You know how it goes, right? All kids are asked, or all young men and women are asked, what are you going to do eventually? And if you go to the US for studies, then people have a couple of more questions added to it, which are you going to come back? And then if you say yes to that, they're going to say, what will you do? And you give those answers without any backing to your answers. Just say, so I used to say, yes, I'm going to come back. And then I would also say, when I come back, I'll start some business. No thinking to it. This was at the age of 19, 20. Because you don't really think too much before giving answers to certain kinds of questions. It was as straight as that. What will you do when you come back? Coming back became uncertain for some time. In the end, I spent about 13 years outside of India. And when that uncertainty was killed, there were a couple of options, maybe 3 options. Since I was a prof, become a prof. Since I had a PhD, I could join a research institute or take up a job. Or I could start a business. So there were a number of other factors that combined to me deciding to start a business. It was also the economic environment at that time. This was in 1995. So that's how 3 or 4 years before I came back, I started that when I come back, I would start some sort of a business. And it stayed at some sort. That's it. So that was the story behind it.
Okay, so you did, if you look back, things seem to have worked out for you. But it was 1995 and you sent a little, maybe we won't send a video message, we'll send a fax because it's 1995. So what would you have liked to have changed about the way you made that decision making, went about that decision making?
Nothing really. Thankfully, what happened was, first of all, both of us, my wife Gauri and I, we were completely in sync on returning to India. So that one usual hurdle to overcome was not there. And she was by choice also a homemaker. So again, that took out another hurdle, that it wasn't a 2-career shift. Kids were young enough, so that adjustment factor was also taken out. We took one more factor out about being in a strange place that we didn't know. So without any thought, I picked Pune because even though I had never lived here, she had always lived here. So that took out one more factor. And then what remained was what I was going to do. And if I were to look back and decide what I would change, and this got some quote unquote operational answer and some slightly philosophical answer. The operational answer was, don't worry about equipment when you are coming back to India. And funny you should say facts, right? Because I did some preparation about what would it take if I were to come back and start a company. So people said, you've got to have a fax machine. In India, without a fax machine, you can't run a business. So I took that seriously. And I bought a Brother fax machine. You won't believe it, for $800. And when I came back, I really didn't need it because every corner store had a place to fax. And so I literally never ended up using it. So that's something I would like to change if I were to rewind. On other fronts, I would say the choice of what I would do, etc., that was pretty straightforward. But I would say I should have thought of a couple of steps beyond the first step that I had to take. Okay, that would have just given me a slightly longer perspective, and it would have changed my preparation a little bit. But who worries about something beyond the next step? When you're young, okay, I got the next thing done and I'm done. That is one change I would make. And I would also make yet another change, and this is slightly philosophical, is whenever you take that bigger step, because the current was still flowing the other way at that time, right? The people were leaving India in hordes. There were some who would be coming back, but by and large, the flow was much thicker going the other way. I would say, while I never for a minute had a doubt about returning and settling and doing whatever it took here, I would have said for the kind of work I was taking up, I should have believed in what I was doing a lot more than I actually did. So that's what I would change. Remove whatever little self-doubt that I had about what I was doing.
Interesting, because there is still a lot of flow from our shores to other shores. Mm-hmm. But do you see this shift in confidence? Is that something that's different, or do we still somewhere lack that little bit of confidence when it comes to, say, competition, trust in ourselves? Do you see that having changed?
It is a very personal decision, Ramanand. Whenever it happens, it's extremely difficult to draw any generalization, because then it doesn't apply in certain cases and you have counter arguments, etc. There are various factors. I think the biggest factor in if somebody is trying to come back and it doesn't work out, it would be that, or they don't even execute on it, is looking for safety of all kinds. Whenever people have asked me while planning a return, Shridhar, what should I do? You did that. So tell us what we should do. So I say, in your life, you're setting out on an adventure, and just deal with it like you are doing that again. And beyond that, don't try anything else, because you can't really prepare too much when you are on an adventure. You can certainly take certain precautions, but otherwise, by and large, it is deal with things as they come. So we were thankfully mentally prepared for that.
Let's fast forward. Right now, you're part of kPoint. And also in the last couple of decades, you've seen a lot of, you've gone through your career journey in very interesting ways. So let's talk a little bit about kPoint. Incidentally, you're celebrating 10 years of kPoint this year. So congratulations to the entire team. So
thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the origins of kPoint. How did that idea emerge? I'm also curious to know, while making the decision around kPoint, what are the kinds of things that you wanted to optimize for, and what are the things that you learned that you wanted to stay away from?
Sure. Might take a little while to talk about all of this. You're aware that kPoint was incubated in GS Lab, which is a larger product development services company. And it is running its 17th year now, whereas kPoint is running its 10th year, 11th year, rather, we completed 10. Why did we incubate something inside GS Lab? The reason was pretty simple. We started GS Lab with the objective of building intellectual property and see what happens with it. That was the founding objective for us at GS Lab. And all my colleagues at that time were completely in sync on that particular point. So we just went about doing it. And the person who actually began kPoint is Atul Narkhede. He had come on board at GS Lab to develop new technology, and he went about doing that. And it was not that we just landed on the idea of kPoint, which I must say has evolved definitely in form and shape, but the core of the idea has not changed. So 10 years ago, we began doing something because we wanted to solve one of our own problems. Okay. And why did we think of solving one of our problems? And the answer to that is also very grounded and simple. It was that we tried to figure out other big important problems that we should solve and build some cool IP and maybe build great business on top of it. And so we first thought of digital rights management. And after thinking about it for some time, we gave it up. We didn't have any, individual feel to it. We were learning by doing our market research. Once we gave that up, we said, maybe we can build some authentication technology for public networks. And then we worked on that, and for various reasons, we decided to say we are not going to do that either. There are reasons, very valid logical reasons we have. But one of the things we had kept in mind is that if we're going to make a change, we're going to make a change quickly. So we didn't spend too much time in making these two decisions. Then for the third one, we said we've got to build something where we experience the problem ourselves. Okay. And so what are the problems we experience? So we went through the list and we landed on this problem that we are always talking to people who are at different locations in different time zones, and staying in sync, communicating, etc., is a little bit of a challenge all the time. And the standard way of doing that, and it was just starting out. I remember paying over $100 for 1 hour of a web meeting from GoToMeeting at that time to hold a customer call. So we said we would build a web meeting infrastructure and take an additional step of keeping that meeting recorded, and not just keep it recorded, but make it deeply searchable. And so that would solve our problem, because the next day you could look through it very quickly and you can refer to it like an item in the library. And so we built it. That was how it began. So there are several other things that we had in mind at that time, that we said, until we define the product market fit, we will not go to raise venture capital. And we still haven't raised it, not because we don't have a product market fit, but now we don't feel the need to.
Shridhar, prior to kPoint, you spent a lot of time in services kinds of companies, right?
Yes.
So, you work with product companies, some of the best in the world, but still you come let's say the originating DNA is services.
Yes.
Was that a difficult shift for a lot of people, or could people make that switch very well? I'm talking about the initial group of people who went to kPoint from GS Labs. So can you talk to me about that shift?
Sure. So first of all, I'll talk about the shift that I made from, it was a very slow shift. It was over many years. And it was a very deliberate and planned shift with a lot of experience. And so therefore, since it was always studied as a problem in our minds, we didn't have any challenge there. Okay. Of course, there were some things that we didn't do as well as we should have, and some that we did well. But that's part of the standard learning. Every set of people go through their own unique experiences. For us, for people there were about 10 or 12 people who went to kPoint from GS Lab. And we had 8 of them are still around after 10 years in the 11th year. So that was one of the great successes for us. That is one of the great successes for us. And the reason for that turning out that way was that we didn't mix people. Even though we got incubated in a larger services company and each person contributed to the other, we never said your primary job is sometimes this and sometimes that. We kept the primary job fixed for people. They shared their knowledge, but they did one thing. And the people who went to kPoint from GS Lab were people who were absolutely hired to do the work we were doing at kPoint. There were no shifts like that. So that's why that didn't turn out to be a problem.
There are lessons from the shift to services to products that you can think of, in the sense that, do you culturally, for example, what is a product culture like for a lot of these people who've been in services? Are they going to experience a lot of a different set of ways to do appraisals? So can you tell us a little more about how you think in terms of leading services versus leading products?
So there are many different aspects of this, Ramanand. In fact, so many that we would consume the whole hour. But I'll try to be focused on the key ones. Okay. So first of all, I think most of the people either at the technology company are engineers, right? And engineers like to be treated in a certain way. And what happens is that many times as a services company grows larger, engineers stop being treated like engineers. They start to get treated, quote unquote, resources. As long as you don't do that, for the engineers, there is no problem. Okay. Because if you're doing outsourced product development, each engineer is anyway working on some product. Okay. So from the engineer's point of view, there is literally zero difference. Okay. So where does the difference arise? The difference arises in how you manage those engineers. Okay. And that is different in case of a business which derives revenue for the time the engineer spends. Okay. It could be based on hours, it could be based on months, but it's related to elapsed time. Versus the value the engineer produces in a product company. And an engineer by him or herself cannot produce value in a product business. There are many other factors that come in, such as the product market fit, your ability to market, your ability to sell, your discipline in product management, your ability to support, ability to document and communicate about the product. These are all as important as building the product, right? In fact, building the product includes all of them, right? And whereas in a services business where you get paid for the time of the engineer, even though your customer may want you to think of the product beyond just writing code, it is very difficult for you to do that for, say, tens of products that you are building in your services company, because nobody has that level of product management bandwidth. Plus, you're not in the market, so you don't get that feel. And therefore, you don't take on that responsibility. That's a big difference. And the third biggest difference would be just the risk and reward equation, right? They're very different in the two setups. So it is the management team that has to understand this deeply enough and give the right kind of treatment. Both are very valuable aspects of the tech industry. And if you look at it from the customer's point of view, there is no product that doesn't need service. There is no service that doesn't need productization. So there are two sides of one coin. And from the customer's point of view, if you look at them, then different perspectives emerge. And you may make a decision to actually keep providing services instead of building a product. Whereas in the other case, you may get wiped out because somebody produces a product for the service that you are providing. So these are very specific decisions. But by and large, I talked about the three things there.
Just reflecting back on my own career, I was a rookie software engineer once. And one thing that services folks in the services side of things, the advantage, should they choose to take it, was that they were much closer to customers. They could get to interact. You got to hone certain skills. there is often a criticism made of engineers in product sort of environments is that there are a lot of layers between you and the customer, and you can live in a bit of an ivory tower of your own. Have you thought about this? Have you tried to do something different in terms of the getting that channel of information to your engineers? Is that
Yes.
something that you're very keen on doing?
Yeah, actually, we fix that very easily. Just expose the engineers to deal with support requests, and they get very close to customers. It's a very easy problem to solve. In fact, there is a big difference there. In a services outfit, and you are actually right that an engineer in a services business gets to see a lot of angry customers all the time. And at least in the early days of a product company, you may not see that because your product is not yet out the door. So, but once you have customers, that changes. The reason why a customer in a services business will talk to the engineer is they are directly interested in what the engineer is producing, okay, or what the team is producing. But in a product business, the customer talks to you for the product you have produced. And so that outlook is completely different. Okay? The nature of interaction there is also very different. And I think that difference actually completely changes what can go wrong in the two cases. In one case, you are being compared with maybe your other colleague in the team who's more productive. And in the other case, you're being compared to the best-in-class product in the market that the customer did not choose, but chose yours. And then he's saying, what's going on here? Or they have their own demands on your roadmap. So I think that customer interaction bit does get taken away very quickly depending on how you manage the product team.
So my final question before moving ahead to another subject is that in terms of if I'm an engineer or I'm an engineering manager, what advice do you have for people thinking about their careers in the next 5 to 10 years in a product sort of an environment? We have a sense of how the services, we have a lot of exposure to career paths in services in India. But for, say, a career path in products, what advice do you have for young engineers right now?
That's a difficult question, Ramanand, because we are in that sense only a 10-year-old company, pretty young, right? And there are companies that have products which have been around for decades. First point here is that don't get too enamored of the technology. Understand the customer's problem better than the customer understands. And then produce whatever technology you have for it. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is make sure you are going to use the product yourself. And by and large, companies don't do such a good job of it. We included. We are always trying to use the product ourselves. But sometimes we can't use it in the way the customer uses it because of the scale they have and because of the business they are in. That apart, being forced to use your own product is very important. And the third is don't just never begin building until you really think of the experience you want to deliver. And the user experience is not just the design guys or UX guys' job. It is every engineer's job, every person's job, in fact. And so those are the three things I would say. And those are all capabilities. There is no change in title, for example, that may ever happen for you. So if you're working for a product company, just keep becoming a better and better engineer. You don't look for changes in titles. And in fact, great product companies are built by engineers who work on the product forever. There is no change in their daily life. It's just building the next improved version of the product.
So a better version of yourself and a better version of the product is, I think, how I would put it.
Yes.
So Shridhar, let's talk about videos now. 10 years ago, videos were seen as something that belonged to YouTube, say. How did you see the shift of video adoption within the enterprise? Tell me a couple of the big use cases that you saw emerging, And then I want to bring you to 2020 and the shift that, if at all, if it has had on video adoption. So let's do the first 9 years.
Yes, I think the big shift or big use case for videos has not really changed. Okay, the extent of usage has really changed. Okay, but and we are only talking B2B. Okay, we never looked at consumer video and the changes that has gone through. So in the B2B setting, videos were always used for A, marketing, B, for internal communications, or in general corporate communications, and C, for training and developing people. And I consider knowledge videos or library videos to be a part of this learning and development. So these are really the three functions in which video was getting used even at that time. That has not really changed. Okay, so early on, when we actually began doing this, we had a format of the video, and that format is today very common, and we'll come to that when we talk about 2020. But the format that we had was of a 2-pane video. So I, as a layperson, could create a 2-pane video in which in one pane I would see my own face, and in the other pane I could see whatever I was sharing. Okay, and this actually used to be the format in which the L&D industry would produce their SCOM packages, and they would give it to someone to develop them and pay them. It used to be a very classic L&D content service, may still be. We automated that. We just made it, you connect to our cloud and log in, no install, and have a camera and pull down our plugin, and there you go. You can create a video with 2 panes, and you can have a pointer and publish it right away. Didn't have to upload it anywhere. So that actually was real innovation at that time in the market. On top of it, we would make it searchable by looking through the text that the person was sharing on the screen or through the document. And that actually used to attract people a lot in the early days. So the objections were different. The objections were, who will do that? We don't have experts. People don't like to be on camera. That still is a problem, but it's going down now. And we don't have enough bandwidth. It will take a lot of bandwidth. So these were the early objections, but the real challenge we were solving was for a person who knows something to be able to communicate what he or she knows in an audio-visual form without seeking external help. And that was the solution we were giving. The other solution was, of course, ingest your web meeting recording and make that searchable. Both were, in a way, the same thing. The source was different, but the end user value was the same. First 9 years, I would say doing this better and better was really the goal.
And did 2020 change this in any particular fashion? Did you see, did more people turn their videos on in a sense?
Yes, so actually something changed even before that. We have always been focused on the India market. Okay. And in 2016, for us, a big event happened, and that was Jio was launched across the country. And the kind of bandwidth they provided and the cost at which they provided and the devices on which they provided just changed everything. So this bandwidth issue went away. And that changed things a lot for us. The conversations at sales time changed. People also were much bolder to decide. And because the bandwidth was high and they were consuming YouTube like nobody's business, and I don't know if TikTok was around then, but there was TED Talks, and all companies wanted to do their own YouTube, their own TED portal, and suddenly everything changed in terms of comfort of having video as a tool to do either marketing or corporate communications or training and development. So 2020 took that to another level. In 2020, what happened is everybody was doing video all the time. It was a video conference. And the Zoom fatigue came in, and it was just too much. And So instead of being in a live meeting all the time, people started preferring on demand, especially when they needed to do it at their own pace or on their own schedule or do it again. Those were the changes that took place. In fact, using video became business critical, certainly in 2020. You had no options. People couldn't get people into a training room. The town halls were all video. The scale became a problem. All of these changes took place in 2020.
Interesting. You mentioned Geo in 2016. There has been this steady trend of democratization of content, right? So it could be content creation tools, sharing platforms, consumption. But going by my own experience and what we've seen around us, within companies, individuals behave differently, right? They perhaps are reluctant to create content. They don't see it as part of their business. So when it comes to participation by individuals, has that challenge still remained the same? Do you see the ratio of creation to consumption still not as great as it should be?
It's actually not, you're right. It is not as great as it should be on an average. Okay. Now, the reason why it works well in certain companies and does not in others is that there is a certain culture that every company has. Okay? If the sharing culture dominates, then a lot more people create videos. Okay? And sharing culture has other benefits too. But in some cases, the nature of business is such that there isn't a whole lot people need to share with others. It's like a cookie cutter, people working business, and whatever they need to see can be purchased off the shelf. And so there is no need to create. So in that case, it's a hard time to sell to such companies. This, more than the reluctance to do video, it is more connected with how sharing savvy your company is. Because before video, there was text, right? Web pages, and how many people created blogs to share inside the content. It was just the same charade, right? I remember running so many campaigns to get people to write blogs. And not many people wrote, because if the culture was not there, they won't do it. You have to do something extra for it.
Since you mentioned dog fooding, is this a problem that you have tackled and solved at kPoint?
I would say it is getting better every day. Okay. So I'll tell you personally what I'm doing is, if I see an occasion for doing a knowledge transfer of whatever kind, I create a video. And then I would talk to people about it. So you have to set the example. It flows from the top. So it's now more people do it. Within engineering for tech transfer, they have to do it. We are encouraging sending videos to customers. Sometimes security issues are there and people say, don't record anything about me, just talk to me and don't even record them. Those issues are there when you are on the border of a company. But doing it every single time is also not possible. You have to be judicious about when you would create a video versus when you would write an email. Because there are two challenges with video. One is on the creation side, and it's getting easier every day. Okay? More people create, and sometimes it gets created out of a Zoom recording like this. The other problem is viewing of the video is still linear. I can go up and down in a document very quickly, look at the headings. We are also working in the product to solve the linear viewing of a video as a technology problem. And we have made some headway on it, but we have not really solved it for the world. We have solved it in certain cases. So therefore, if you create a video where you are better off giving a paragraph or two to the person, then you actually have achieved less than what you could. But you have to be judicious about it. And then whenever it makes sense, create a video.
It sounds almost like you have to adopt a new form of literacy. It's like new media literacy, right? You've got to be savvy about what you choose, when, what context, and for what kind of audience.
Very true. And I think the word you use, literacy, is very important, because you call a person literate when they can read and write. and we go through the entire schooling and college experience, improving our reading and writing. Do we do that for video or audio-visual communication? No, it is looked at as a special skill, public speaking or acting. Whereas now you're starting to use video at work. So maybe there is room to actually train kids and young people to do more video. And viewing a video to learn from is also a skill. So there are these various things about using a new medium effectively for work, which is coming into the workforce. It's not there yet.
It sounds like we're all on stage now, right? So we have to deal with it. You can't run away from it.
Correct.
So since we briefly talked about reluctance to be on camera, I'm sure it is difficult for certain leaders to set the tone. For example, how do you get the leader to start modeling it? Can you think, without naming names, can you think of examples of leaders that you've seen among your client base who have managed to adopt to this world of being on stage? What are they doing? How are they overcoming these challenges, these fears? So tell me a little bit about that.
There is only one simple thing, Ramanand. The leader that does not look at his own video does much better than someone who watches his own video. That is the primary problem. See, no leader has a challenge going in front of a room full of people and giving them a message or facing tough questions. That's why they've got there. Okay. Now, what happens in case of a video is suddenly someone may start thinking of themselves as, okay, now this has to look as good as a movie caliber video. And when they watch it, it doesn't come out like that. Or there are some simple problems to solve. I'll come to them in a minute. But the mantra is, you record a video, if you're on camera, if you're doing a piece to camera, don't look at it yourself. Let somebody do that and ship it if it meets their standard. If you look at it yourself, you will not like it. Now, things that go wrong are very simple to fix. The first thing that goes wrong is you don't prepare a message the way you would when you go in front of a room full of people. You think you can wing it, and then it doesn't come out right. Preparation is important. To the people who are shooting your video, and if you're doing it yourself, you are not careful enough about lighting. Lighting plays a huge part. Even more important than lighting, and in fact, the most important part is audio. And so you have to do that. And the fourth part, which I think doesn't arise if the person has given it a little bit of thought, is our behavior changes when you are talking to someone, as against talking to the screen. So the extra skill that needs to be developed is learning to talk to the screen as if you're talking to people. That's a little hard to develop, but once you get that, then you're there.
So Shridhar, looks like you've been practicing all of these for a while now. Do you set yourself do you have a checklist? Do you have a certain quota of videos you do in a week? How do you get this practice in?
It takes time. I would say it takes at least 6 months before you get so comfortable that you would do it in one shot. Okay. You've got to get your IT environment ready. Then you also need to get comfortable with the content if you are going to show some screen, because creating a PowerPoint to ship by itself versus creating a slide deck where you're going to speak to it, these are two different things, right? So you have to get that part right. And the third is just telling yourself that you don't need to view yourself and just let it go out as if you would send an email. That takes some time. But it does take time. It requires practice. It's an acquired taste.
Right. We talk about being learners for life. I think this is no better opportunity right now for a lot of people than to learn something like this.
Yes, very, very true, Ramanand. And there is one factor I've not even touched upon, is you may create the video, okay? But what about getting people to watch it? How's that going to happen? Nobody watches a video just because you created it, unless you are Shah Rukh Khan or you are Gangnam Style dancer, right? So how do you get people to watch your video at work? And it's not enough to just create it. It's got to fit in somewhere. It's got to be messaged about. You have to promote it. You have to do something extra. And that's half the story, perhaps a little more than half. Because otherwise, it's like a tree fell in the forest, right? Nobody knew about it. You created a video when there is a truckload of video an individual gets a day, nobody notices it. So that's a bigger problem, and that also is a special skill.
It's almost in the realm of persuasion and influence, right? You cannot shove it down someone's face. On that note, I actually wanted to ask, are there lessons from the B2C world, which has been using videos for a long time, and there's been a host of innovation. We briefly talked about TikTok as well. So do you study these kinds of platforms and try and understand how they could apply to an enterprise world? Or are these worlds so different that there's not a lot of cross-pollination that we can do?
This is a very important question, and I don't think I have the answer, but because we get both kinds of signals. I have seen customers asking us to produce the ability to create avatars in our videos, because they say, if you give me an avatar, then I'll create a video in my avatar, and then I'm not worried about how I look on the camera. And then there are other people who say, and these are actual cases where, a large global manufacturing company said we were very effective at doing knowledge transfer because people look like the way they were in real life. And others who were viewing the video lapped it up because they felt like they're talking to a real person or hearing it from a real person. So exactly opposing viewpoints, right? So we don't know. It depends. It depends on the company and the style of communication they have there. There are things to be learned from B2C world in how well they promote. They just do a superb job of it. Okay? That has to be translated into the business world, or video at work, if you allow me to call that. There is an angle that comes in which is not there in the consumer world. In the consumer world, I am motivated to go watch the video. Whereas at work, I'm there to work. I'm going to watch a video. I'm going to do anything only if it's going to help my work. Otherwise, I will not do a single thing. So basically, it means that video that you're going to give to people has to be something that helps them in their work. If it doesn't, it won't get watched. Nobody is there to watch video, right? Unless they have nothing else to do. So that's an angle which is very sharp at work. And so that has to be kept in mind. That's not at all there in the consumer world. And so creating relevant content, which has the context the person wants, is the whole key in getting video get used at work.
And I think there's also a relative lack of internal marketing channels, right? All our channels are outward focused, and the channels that are internal are used for tactical communication. Email is an example.
Correct.
When you try and solve these, when you get your product into an enterprise ecosystem, do your clients need help with these sort of behavioral, almost psychological issues, right? Because for the first time, we're being deluded by content that is so wonderful outside that you compare it with what's inside and you say, this doesn't hold up to that. Do you therefore have to hold the hand of your client in terms of solving these human problems as well?
Yeah, that's one of the huge tasks for us every time we make a sale. If we are not able to develop a champion for kPoint at our customer, we don't succeed. Okay? It's a given. We know that now after so many years. And we have to work hard on developing those champions. Sometimes there are champions who are already there, and that's why they buy kPoint. Or we have to convert somebody into our champion. And then we have to support them a lot with the programs they would run, how they would report, how they make a business case for what they're doing, how we train their users so that more and more people create. All of this is the hard work of getting video adopted in one company at a time.
So I want to shift gears towards talking about learning and development, which is another major reason why video gets consumed within the enterprise. And this also ties in with increasing asynchronous sort of consumption, on-demand consumption, that when I want to consume and not when you're telling me to consume this. So the first question is that, is this truly becoming more mainstream inside enterprises, or is this just something that we think is going to happen?
It is getting there, Ramanand. And like I said, video conferencing is an absolute must-have today, right? No business can live without video conferencing. And for larger companies, they're also getting to a stage where they can't live without live streaming of video, just because of the scale. And for various reasons, because there is a lot of video content already there, they are also required to have video on demand. So it actually goes in that flow. Video conferencing, no-brainer. If the company is large, live streaming, also no-brainer. On-demand video takes a little time to get there, because people have to realize that not all communication has to happen in a video conference. In fact, some communication is not good to happen in a video conference. We cannot always get people to watch purchased video, because purchased video does not carry the context for my company or my role, my job. So somebody in the company has to share what they know. And when they realize that, then they start to use kPoint or a product like kPoint. So that part about adoption, which is very important, requires this element of realizing what to use when. In the company, we can't push it down their throat.
Correct. Therefore, in this environment, what role do you think the L&D team now plays? Because earlier it was a matter of getting a bunch of training vendors and arranging for training and being the kind of logistical partner in-house in a sense. But now with this shift, is the entire edifice under threat, or how should they reinterpret themselves?
So training itself is segmented, right? I would say there are 3 types of trainings that take place in a company. One is your standard induction training, right? Either you have campus hires or new hires, and you have to induct them into the company. That's one. The other is calendar-driven training, which is for the core skills that most of the engineers or most of the people at the company need. Say it's a bank, then there is calendar-driven training. The third is your customized training or custom training. Custom training is required when the company is on a new initiative, or a large new project is being rolled out, or you have a new business line foray being done by the company. So in those cases, you need custom training. Now, the way to fulfill these 3 is different. Okay. The logistics procurement-driven training applies to induction and calendar. If somebody tries to apply that to the custom training, then chances of success are slightly lower, because you may not get somebody to do your kind of context setting, right? Then it needs to be an expert in the subject, along with someone who will give context for the company. So then that has to be created, and there your subject matter experts come in. You could get a subject matter expert from outside, but to give the context, you need your own business expert or SME. And so what method you use depends on which one of these 3 it is. Now, the role L&D plays is L&D has a very standard Patrick model in which to evaluate the effectiveness of training, right? And I don't know, it's reaction, learning, behavior, and outcomes, something like that. And so only the outcomes really relate to impact on the business. The level 3 behavior relates to whether the person's behavior changed as a result of the training. But real evaluation of the training today in companies is only at the first 2 levels. One is what was their reaction and what they learned. And so if you're going to measure it at that level, and still, unfortunately, bulk of the L&D teams do that because it's guaranteed to, you're guaranteed to be able to do that. Observing behavior takes time. Business outcomes take even longer. So therefore, certain companies, L&Ds, amongst our customers, for example, they have taken the approach of being true facilitators and not the providers. They would say, look, we have set up this. Depending on you, the business unit, how you behave, you run your training, you run your L&D. In any case, 70% of the training happens on the job. And so some BUs do a good job of it, some don't. And that's how it goes. There is not a whole lot we can do.
Right. A trend in some newer, smaller companies is not to have a dedicated L&D team. It's partly financial, partly a sort of a philosophical way of doing it and saying,
correct.
If you're my employee, I'll give you a budget, do your learning, get your fees reimbursed with us. Mm-hmm. So this calls for a lot of an empowered individual taking charge of their learning journey and so on. Do you think that's ultimately the right thing to do, or you will still need guides within an organization to tell you where to go?
So this depends on the person. By the way, this is not happening only in small companies. Even large companies are now adopting systems called learning experience platforms, who have backend arrangements with Coursera, Udemy, Udacities, and LinkedIn Learning. So there is one place in the company where anybody in the company can go, sign up, do the course, and then the company will pay the content vendor directly and maybe give you an award, right? So this is quite common now. But does it really change anything drastically? It simplifies some things for sure. But does it make people great learners in a company? Not really. There were libraries there earlier. Did people go and read books like crazy? No, they did it only when they needed to, right? So that aspect of necessity to learn something continues to be the most important factor. And because, again, I would go back to my point earlier that you would learn when it's necessary for you to learn. I don't go to work to learn. I go to work to get a pay. And to get my pay, if I have to learn something, great. And if all of that is great and I want to build my career, I will learn more. But I always learn more from people. Going to Google and looking for stuff is going to happen anyway, because all the content that needs to be there is free. It doesn't cost a whole lot also to buy it from some vendor. So I think the real change to happen in a company is whether you encourage sharing inside the company. Okay, when people are proactively telling others what they should know, and people who don't know are proactively picking it from others who know, and there is conversation between people. That's how everybody learns. Technology after technology wave has come in, but the human process of learning has not really changed. They still learn from people.
Right. There's also this tension between content that is educative and entertaining. And I think within an enterprise, it's hard to be very entertaining around very everyday kinds of things. How do you see that playing out? Are companies even getting content creators to make something seem more engaging? And do you think it detracts from the core purpose of a video inside an enterprise?
Yes and no. Sometimes what happens is you ask a subject matter expert to record some videos. And with no people in front of him, his energy is low. He's not really an expert, so doesn't get the lighting and audio right. And the video doesn't come out the way somebody who asked him to create expects, and that goes down. But once these little things are taken care of and the person is given certain support and certain awareness is created, it is not how he performs. It is what relevance his content has to the person viewing it that is most important. So it's not really about video. It is a piece of content, be it a document, be it a diagram, be it a picture of the whiteboard. The context I have for it and its relevance to what I'm working on now are the two most important factors. Video is just one of the media.
Right.
Right.
One final question about videos is that I think you spoke quite a bit about sharing culture within an organization. So uh, tell me a little bit about videos as cultural vehicles, right? So we've spoken about engagement, we've spoken about
Yes.
learning, but
Yes.
these little moments, especially in a world where all your team is distributed, everyone is different.
Yes.
Have you seen any interesting examples emerge about using this for cultural transmission?
Oh, yes, a lot. In fact, there is one thing about video still. It's not become passe. It's not become the yesterday media. People are still excited when they say, hey, I'm going to make a video for that. Or somebody is likely to click on a communication which is video in it much more than just text. And it's just so much there in the consumer world that they also like to see video at work. So that factor is very strong, which is also why we are growing, because it's still increasing. Now, the point that you asked about, are you seeing interesting ways in which this is being used? Is it being used for cultural transformation? So yes, very much. I can give you a couple of examples. One of our customers ran a 21-day program with video shown through kPoint, but which already existed on YouTube. And this was video of really famous people. So chances are that half the company would have already seen those videos. But this particular company ran a 21-day program where some such video link was published through kPoint at 7 a.m. in the morning. So when the person is at breakfast, and the type of video was such that the person would like to watch it with the family. Okay. And then at work, and this was pre-pandemic, so people were still meeting each other in the hallway. The leaders in the company would say, hey, did you watch that Steve Jobs video we posted today? What do you think of it? Or if there was a company meeting of a certain business unit, then before the meeting, they would play that video. And then they would post data about who's really doing things very well and promoting it further. They did that for 21 days. This was a cultural transformation effort driven entirely by video. Was very successful, all done on kPoint. Okay, but that program, building that program around it and executing that program was more important than the fact that video could be uploaded and played, and data could be presented about who watched it. So that's one transformation program. The other one that we had was War of Perspectives. This was at a large oil and natural gas public sector company in India. The first one was at a telecommunications equipment vendor. So in this company, they created a War of Perspectives program where everybody had to give their perspective on some issue, create a video, post it, and then it was being viewed by a set of well-respected leaders in the company, and they had a culmination event about whose perspectives got the most votes or something like that. So a catchy name, some top-down support for executing the program, and some end event for concluding it. All of these are very important. They are standard in any cultural transformation event or program. So videos were the main centerpiece here.
Yeah, fascinating, because I think curation is something that we at Choose to Think are very fond of. We do a lot of curation for some of our clients as well as for some of our subscribers. So this reminded me of one example where there was a finale, there was an event that someone had to talk about a future of work in their area. And so there was this lead up to it where they had to read articles, have discussions, do all that melting pot thinking before that big day.
Yes.
And that whole process of curation, the community coming together, talking about it every day, and then presenting it echoes what you just said.
Yes.
It's a very underrated form of cultural transmission.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Sridhar, we have about 10 minutes left on the clock. So I just want to ask a couple of questions around, just to recap your experience of making products in India for India, because that is another route that you seem to have deliberately taken. If there is a company now starting a product, what should they keep in mind in terms of selling outside India first, or starting with India? What are the drivers that they should keep in mind?
Yeah, there is a lot of knowledge around this these days, Ramanand, and I can't claim that we are still, I would say, a work in progress. We are not a unicorn yet. So if you imagine that to be the ultimate. So it would be difficult for me to say something that people don't already know. Even building products in India for India is now very common. A lot of people are doing it. This market is growing. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who want to do things here. Even B2B is very common. Some time back, it was all B2C, but now B2B is also common. So what I'll do is I will comment on some common pitfalls that I have seen. Okay. The first one is building the org and building the business is highly underrated. The value of that is highly underrated compared to fundraising, valuation, and becoming big. Okay. And I would say fundraising, valuation, scaling are critical, but never at the cost of building a business and building an org. So that's one of the points I would like to make. The second point is, especially for those who are engineers first, okay, and then become entrepreneurs. I would say build less and communicate more. A very common mistake. There is such a strong tendency when you talk to customers who say, if you had that, we would buy your product. And then you actually take them at face value and build more. Or a competitor comes out with something and starts to do really well and does a big fundraise, and you say, I got to build that too. There is some of that which is true, but by and large, the principle is build less and communicate more. Okay. And the third one is, and this was a hard learning for us, in sales meetings, talk less and listen more. If your salespeople talk more and listen less, you've got to change their behavior. These are three things I would say to people who are going to do products.
Sure. I know nothing like hard won or hard learned lessons, right? You don't forget them for life. But yeah. So I'm curious, did you do something very deliberate with your communication, the ability to go into sales meetings? Is that something that came naturally to you, or you had to work really hard at it? And what did you do?
I definitely had to work at it. I was so tempted to start talking about what we have done. The minute I felt that the customer needs that, I was so tempted. I had to work at it. I had to work even harder to not make a demonstration in the first meeting. There is also a little bit about the Indian buyer behavior, especially if you work hard at getting a meeting and the person is not looking for such a product already. Then it is a real skill to not do a demonstration, because many times the person says from across the table, you looked for this meeting, you came here to sell me something, you show me what you've got, because he does not want to talk. And then the entire skill is in setting up a meeting in such a way that he talks, or in the meeting make him talk, which is very hard. And you are very likely to get into a comfort zone where something is going on in the meeting, you are at least showing and the guy is reacting. Many such meetings come to nothing. And it needs work to not let this happen.
Very interesting. Shridhar, since we spoke so much about videos, do you have certain video channels that you absolutely love and you take inspiration from in terms of the content, in terms of how they're going about getting people to come and listen to them? Any favorites?
I used to have. First of all, I watch a lot of tennis video. Okay, right. That's just my personal hobby. So if I'm not doing anything, I would, and YouTube recommendation algorithm just shows tennis there for me. Right. Then there are some that my son recommends. I have not particularly subscribed to them. Then lately I have started watching the Atharva channel. about commentary on current events. Those guys do a reasonably good job. Otherwise, whatever comes through on WhatsApp, somebody sends a link, I would click on it and watch it.
Yeah, I think we've spoken a lot about enterprise video and TikTok, but nothing seems to. WhatsApp is the new email, right?
Yeah, that's
Everyone
correct.
has it, no one can do without it, and we all default to it in the end.
Yeah, it's true. Very true.
Okay, Sridhar, we're going to close with a section we call the future relevance of X, where I'll give you different X's and you give me your hot takes on what you think is the future relevance of these. All right.
Okay.
So you're allowed to pass, but only in the most extreme of circumstances.
Otherwise, what am I supposed to say?
You can just say you can just comment on the future relevance of this topic.
Right.
Okay. Let me start with an easy one. Bicycles.
Highly relevant.
Okay. You still have a bicycle?
I ride to work on a bicycle.
Great. Yeah. I think you've been doing it for forever, right?
Forever, yes.
But in a world where the cities aren't all that bicycle friendly anymore, how do you see that?
I think we'll get there. People will start living closer to work. Yeah.
Okay, great. The future relevance of IT services in India.
Huge. Need to be fully digitalized. Our lives have to be completely digital.
Is there a danger that there is just too much digitization? We're leaving behind the real for the virtual. Those kind of techno pessimism. Do you subscribe to it?
No.
Okay.
I think that there are things that can be automated, must be automated. Otherwise, there are other problems. And there is, for various reasons, a lot of opposition to automation. Just look at the vaccination program going on. Right? The part that is set up for automation is just not working because it's being manipulated in various ways.
Correct. Do you have any thoughts on, say, digital divide as such? Do you think it is real and we should be doing something about addressing it?
Yes, absolutely. I think the pandemic has really helped schools getting digitalized. But there are people who are particularly in the poorer sections of the society. They give up when something is not working very quickly. So something has to be done there so that they also think that accessing systems, accessing services, getting work done, getting benefits, all has to happen over digital systems, but there will be vested interests who delay that process.
I think videos do have a role to play here as well, because you can scale them out a lot better, and hopefully they'll contribute to it as well. All right, Shridhar, my last question on future relevance is, we started talking about videos, but we love reading. So I have to ask you the future relevance of reading and books, according to you.
I'm not so sure. I think it is less. Listening to books is going to be much higher. If I were to just go by observing young people around me, they are very visually oriented. They will read on the screen, not in books.
So do you think in some sense we are reverting back to human nature, in the sense that we were always an oral species, or a species that like to see each other, talk to each other, and reading was something we taught ourselves in the interim?
So I would distinguish reading from consuming text on the screen.
Correct.
Okay. Opening a book with pages in it and turning them, or even on Kindle, would be a skill that, in my opinion, will keep going down. But listening to things will keep increasing in consumption volume, and viewing things will also increase. Reading text on the screen will go down.
All right, you've spoken a lot about video today, about reading, and I'm sure a lot of people have been listening to you as well. So thanks a lot, Shridhar, for your time. This was a very intriguing conversation, a lot of things to take away from and think about them. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Ramanand, I wanted to tell you about one thing that we do. You had asked me about engagement at work.
Correct. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the pandemic days, how do you keep people engaged?
Correct.
And one of the things that has worked really well for us is what you guys do for a living, which is running a quiz at the start of any company meeting. And it works so well. I wish there are more and more people who learn this ability to conduct quizzes, which really give people a feel for participation and bringing out what they need to know in ways that is somewhat enjoyable.
Right.
So we have taken that, we do it in the company. And so more power to you guys and running more quizzes.
Thanks, Sridhar. I'm so glad to hear that, because I think the fault lies partly in how people have experienced. Their first quiz is usually a very boring
Yes.
experience. I think we know it's a very social experience for a lot of people. I'm glad that kPoint and all of you are enjoying your quizzing. So
Yes,
more
very
power
much.
to all of you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for doing this. I enjoyed it, Raman.